Hey friends, today I'm in Chatham County, North Carolina, and behind me, that building that you see back there is Flint Ridge Church, or was Flint Ridge Church. It's no longer in use today, but the cemetery is. And for the past few years, I've been coming here documenting the headstones, cleaning up a few of the graves that needed it, and also getting to know the owner of this place, and chatting with him about what his plans for the future are here. So today I want to walk you around the grounds. We're going to look at the building, learn a little bit more about the church's history and the community history, and then I want to take you into the cemetery so that we can look at the headstones there, look at some of the work I've done to clean them, and then we can talk about the people who are buried here. Okay, so this is a better look at Flint Ridge Church. This was a Methodist church, and from the records I've seen, this was originally organized in the 1830s. Now, this building is not from the 1830s. I think this one was built in either the 1890s or the very early 1900s. Very recently, there were two large trees just by the front of this building, but the current owner had them removed to help prevent more damage to the roof. Most of the time when I come here, there are vultures to greet me, so we'll see if they're here today. So I wanted to show you the front view of this church here. It's really pretty. Now, this building is not used right now, but the owner does have hopes of fixing it up and repurposing the building. And while it is empty, this property is very well cared for. Like I mentioned, there's a cemetery here that is looked after. The owner is here often, and also the local neighborhood keeps an eye on it, as well as law enforcement. So I just want you all to be aware that I do have permission to be here, so please don't trespass here. We're not going to go technically inside the building, but I can show you a little bit through this window here. This is like a little vestibule off the front of the church. You can see there's all kinds of just like junk on the floor. Some of it from the vultures, some of it from people just leaving their junk around over the years. There's a cemetery off there you can see. We'll go check that out a little bit more in a minute. So one of the interesting features here that that's fairly common for buildings in the South is that this church, you might notice, is set up on rocks under the foundation. So if we squat down here, I'll see if I can show you underneath. You can see, I don't know if it's quite a crawl space, but some kind of crawl space underneath this building here that connects through to the other side. So this building is stacked up here on native stone. This part of North Carolina has a lot of stone. So those stones were probably quarried right here on this property. And that would serve a lot of purposes. I always get questions from people that aren't from the South about why the building is up on stones like this. Back before air conditioning, lifting the building up like this would create a natural airflow underneath the building. And that wind or airflow would rise up through the building, creating some coolness. It also kept some separation between the wood of the building and the ground so that when it was really wet, the wood wouldn't get so waterlogged and filled with bugs and pests and that kind of thing. So here's a side window. Like I mentioned, I've been coming here for a couple of years, and over the years, the condition of this building has gotten worse from people coming and breaking windows and stealing things. But now this building is under surveillance, so hopefully there won't be any further damage before the repairs can happen. So like I mentioned, this building was built likely in the 1890s or maybe very early 1900s. You can see where some of the windows are busted out, but there are plans underway to get those fixed. There was also a hole in the roof by the front bell tower, but that has been patched, and like I mentioned, those trees were removed to help mitigate any worry about whether or not they might damage the roof further. So here's the back of the building. And again, like I mentioned, here's that stacked stone foundation that you can see underneath the building. It looks like the vultures aren't here today because they would normally be out here. Sometimes also the neighbors' dogs come over to say hi. So maybe they'll show up and say hello today. On this side of the building, I thought it was pretty interesting that if you pay close attention, up here at the top of the windows, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see them in the video, there's little brackets that were used for hanging shutters. Let me see if you can see them better on this side. Most of the windows, they're still present on some of the windows on this side. So that means there used to be shutters here. And one time I was kind of just taking a picture and something caught my eye under here. And underneath the building is one of the old shutters that looks like it's painted like a green or a teal color. So that kind of gives you a better idea of what this building might have looked like at one point, you know, painted white with green shutters. The church continued to meet at this building until, I believe, the 1980s. And then in the 1990s, they would hold like a memorial or commemorative service out here periodically, but regular services haven't been held here for quite a while. The last owner of the property passed away, and she left it to the pastor of her church congregation, which is located in a nearby city. And so the church is the owner, that church is the owner of this church. And so they're hoping to have plans to fix up the building, repair the windows and the roof, and then turn this into an event space, possibly with a small museum portion that would kind of talk about the history of the community, which I think would be a really neat reuse for this spot. Okay, now that we've seen a better view of the church, I want to take you guys into the cemetery. So just adjacent to the church, we have the cemetery here. So let's take a closer look at some of these graves here. Like I mentioned, some of these are more recent. This person was buried in 2006. And I think someone was buried here in 2024. So there are definitely some more recent burials. But then we have burials dating back to the 1800s as well. And here on this side of the cemetery is the older section where the stones are a little bit older than the ones on this side where we have more granite and marble. So I just want to take a look at a couple of these. Some of these have recently been cleaned, and not by me. These front three were not cleaned by me. So I think someone's been here looking after their family's headstones, which I appreciate a lot. So there's a few over here. Some of the names I'm seeing in this family are Wright, Loy, Terry, Fawcett. Teague is a common name around here. This is Mrs. Emily White, wife of Wright, Dorset, born January 24th, 1859, and died September 8th, 1898. And we have more recent, I think this is called a pillow top marker for the shape and style, Daniel Stoner and wife, but it doesn't say their death date. This is one that I have cleaned. When I first saw this, it was completely covered in like this black, moldy looking overgrowth. So you couldn't read it at all. You can read some of it now. It's definitely better, but a lot of the stone has definitely worn away over the years. Now, this is one I'm super proud of. When I first saw this one, it was completely maybe not completely, but it was definitely covered in a lot of black, that some of it doesn't come out with the D2 cleaning. There's some of it that's resistant to that. The developer of D2 talked about how they're trying to develop something new that would combat that growth, whatever that is. But this headstone was the first one I cleaned in this cemetery. And this is the headstone of Ella Ada. She was the wife of T.M. Teague. Now, her maiden name was Whitehead, so this was Ella Ada Whitehead. And her husband was T.M. Teague. So Ella was born February 11th, 1865. And she died August 3rd, 1890. She was only 25 years old, 5 months and 22 days old, actually. So because of her age, it might be a safe guess that she might have died in childbirth. I have to see and see if there's any children born at that time. After that, T.M. Teague, her husband, who was a widower, married Ella's sister, which is pretty common back then, that you would potentially marry somebody close in the family after the first one died. So her inscription says, "A precious one from us has gone, a voice I've loved is," I can't quite read that, "a place in a place is vacant in our home which never can be filled." Oh, that's sweet. So I'm really grateful to have been able to have the chance to clean this stone a bit, because you couldn't read it at all when I first saw that. This is another one that I have cleaned. This was also covered in growth and a lot of moss, so I scraped that off, sprayed it with some water and a little bit of D2. There are cracks in this stone that were there before I started, so I wanted to be really careful. I didn't scrub it very hard because of those cracks, and I wasn't sure if it was going to hold up. So it is leaning quite a bit, so it'd be nice to straighten this marker if I can. I need to talk to the owner about maybe doing a little bit more work out here. But this headstone was the infant son of W.E.J. Wright, born September 11th, 1887. So that's one of the markers I've cleaned. I'll make sure to show you guys what that one looked like before as well. Here's another one I've sprayed off. I didn't scrub this one much because it was leaning. I didn't want to do any more damage to cause it to lean anymore. It's just sinking in the ground a little bit. It needs to be propped back up. This one was covered completely in this black overgrowth that you can see there is still some of it left. And this one could still use some more work, but it looks quite a bit different than when I first saw it. And then here's one of the last ones that I've cleaned in this cemetery so far. And this says Nanny, the daughter of H.A. and M.E. Whitehead. She was born December 26th, 1887, and died May 18th, 1890. And her inscription says, "Gone to a better land." So there's quite a few Whitehead people, the members of the Whitehead family that are buried here. Here's another one, for instance. This one hasn't been cleaned. So that black overgrowth I was mentioning, this is kind of what it looks like before you get to clean it. This is the stone of Margaret B., wife of H.A. Whitehead. Looks like she died in 1907. There's some poinsettias that were placed probably around Christmas time, and that was a few months ago now, so I'm going to prop these back up. Again, I'm so grateful to the family and the church members of the nearby church that have cleaned up this property, because when I first got here, this cemetery wasn't. You couldn't really walk around it at all. We have these large obelisk markers that must have been pretty pricey in the day. So typically when you see these, you can make assumptions that the family had a reasonable amount of money, because to spend money on a grave marker, wasn't a big priority if you were poor. So this one is for the Hinshaw family. And a lot of times what they'll do is use one of these to mark many graves. So you want to look around the sides of these columns because there'll be different inscription on either side. So this one, I think, marks the grave of 2 people. So here are their graves. That one right there. And then this one right here. And then their inscriptions are here. This one says Zimri Hinshaw. Can't read it very well, but I'm reading the name off of the headstone down there, or the tombstone down there. From the Hinshaw family. Let's see if we can read this side better. This is Martha McCath Clark, daughter of William and Courtney Clark, wife of Zimri Hinshaw, born in Chatham County, North Carolina on September 1917. And she died July 21st. She was born 1817 and died 1888. She was 70 years old. And this is her marker. So here you have knife out. Martha McMath Hinshaw. And her husband Zimri Hinshaw. And then here's their big marker. And so, like I said, their names are inscribed on either side. But then here you've got their children's names, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but it says children of Zimri and Martha McMath Hinshaw. Sarah Ann was born in 1845. George Washington was born in April 1847. Margaret Ellen, born in 1850. William in 1852. Mary in 1853. And Emily Caroline in 1855. That's quite a few children. Now, this is a marker that I see all the time, a style of marker I see all the time in Chatham County and in the surrounding counties, but I'm not sure what this is called, so chime in down below if you know. What they've done here is taken all of this local stone and masoned it together with some type of it looks like concrete filling of some sort. There's another one over here that you can see. I see these all the time in cemeteries in this area, but I haven't seen them in many other places. So I was curious if anyone knows what this style of marker is called. See, I think it's filled with concrete. Just curious if anyone knows what that's called. So back here in this section of the cemetery, unfortunately, we have quite a few of these stones that have broken in half. These are made of concrete, I believe, so those are prone to cracking, unfortunately. Then we have, hidden under the leaves over here, we have Arrington C. Arrington C., born August 18th, 1846, and died January 1st, 1921. And it doesn't say his last name, it just says Arrington C., but this section of the cemetery, every other name in this area is Carter. So my guess is that his last name was Arrington Carter, unless if that's a G. That might be a G. I'll have to look at the cemetery records when I'm done with this. So this is the Carter family. We have Willis Carter over here. Then this headstone marks the graves of 2 people, Sarah Dixon and Amick Alvis Carter. And their inscription says, though lost to sight, to memory dear. Then over here we have the family name Wren and Wicker. And it's interesting, whenever you go through one of these old cemeteries, you'll notice names that you find all over the area, so that, a lot of these names carried on through street names or creek names or that kind of thing. And this cemetery is old, but it's not super old. So most of the headstones that are in here are carved. But if you look closely, there are a few that aren't, and here's one of them. This is just a fieldstone marker. Let me pull this away. There's no inscription on it. That doesn't mean that there wasn't at some point. There might have been, but this kind of stone is really difficult to carve. So this one has probably always been just an unmarked field stone. There's another one over here that you can tell because of its placement and because it's standing up and it's not a natural placement for a rock. Also, it's in the middle of a cemetery. We can safely assume that that was a cemetery, a grave marker. You'll see one like this right here, and I can tell you what this means. If we look at this and then this marker, what happens is that sometimes these people would have been buried, and maybe their grave might have just been marked with a crude stone like that, a field stone. But then later on, their descendants, either their children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren, might have had the money to be able to buy an actual marker for them. So they placed that newer marker right where the old one was and left the old marker. That was pretty common. Also, a lot of times that was actually called backdating. So sometimes you'll see a stone that marks the grave of someone who was buried a long time ago, but you can tell that the stone isn't that old. And that's called backdating, where it might have been 20, 30, 40, 100 years later that burial was actually marked. This is the headstone of Nathan P. Boggs. And he was born January 18th, 1860, died December 12th, 1922. And his wife, Mary A. Perrett, born July 14th, 1858, died May 9th, 1911. And then over here is another Perrett grave, so some of her family's buried in here. This is a section for the Overman family. So we have Helen Marie Overman, Bobby Joe Overman, Stella M. Overman, and Robert. So this is one of those newer graves, and like I mentioned, a lot of these are still visited and cared for. So from here you can see quite a bit of the newer flowers that have been placed probably around the holidays. Over here we have a section of the cemetery that is the Stout family. So there's quite an array of headstones in here, from much older ones to more recent modern ones. This one, if you're not familiar, this stone right here, this white one, is a VA stone, which is a Veterans Affairs stone. So if you ever served in the U.S. military in any branch or capacity, you will be offered a stone like this, or your family would be offered a stone like this after you passed. This one is for Virgil Addison Perrett. And he was a private in the Stu Army TNG Corps. Somebody's going to know what that means, because I don't know what that means. Stu Army, I've never seen that before. So he was in the Army in World War I. And he was born July 2nd, 1884, and died January 2nd, 1950. So he survived World War I and came to be buried here. And that's his marker. I can't tell you exactly when that was placed. I believe that they started doing veteran markers in the 50s or 60s, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong on that one. There's another one, that was Virgil's stone, and he was a veteran of World War I. But if you look over here, there's another VA stone, which is this one right here. And this is the stone for Samuel Mitchell Moran. And the symbol at the top of his stone up here, right here, is different. That's the Confederate cross, where Virgil's stone over there had just a Christian cross, I believe. But anyway, here we have Samuel Mitchell Moran's stone, and this is a VA-issued stone as well. And he was in Company G of the 26th Regiment of the North Carolina Volunteers for the Confederate States of America. Samuel was born February 3rd, 1838, and died February 15th, 1886. Now, this is another example of this. So this grave, he died in 1886. This VA stone came quite a bit later, but if you look directly behind it, you'll see this fieldstone marker. And so, can you see it? Sometimes these hide and we use this through video. Okay, so that marker, that's probably the original marker for Samuel. And then later on, someone in his family applied for the VA stone, and they installed this other one. Right next to that fieldstone is a secondary fieldstone right here. That again was probably, like in the 1800s, those were very common. And right in front of it is let's see if we can read this room. You guys see that? Sarah E. Whitehead, wife of Samuel M. Moran. And she was born May 28th, 1841, and died January 5th, 1919. So these two were marked here with these kind of, simple headstone or field stones. And then later on, those were replaced with these newer ones. The Confederate States VA marker, and then also this kind of marker here that they got for Sarah. There are quite a few headstones in here I'd still like to clean, like this one, for instance. You can barely read this at all. I can see that the last name is, it says Margaret, wife of Jacob Overman. There's quite a few headstones and grave markers that I would still like to clean, like this one. You can barely read it. I can make out that the last name is Overman, but I can't read the rest. So it'd be great to be able to clean them so I can get better photos and document this place even more thoroughly. I'm going to wait until it warms up a little bit because the cleaning solution that I use for headstone cleaning is called D2, and it's not recommended to use it when temperatures are going to reach anywhere close to freezing, and it's pretty cold still right now in North Carolina, so I'll come back and clean more of these when it warms up a little bit. This is the view of the church from the cemetery. I think it's so pretty. Something that was interesting that I didn't notice the first time I was out here, but thought I would point out to you guys. It's kind of a relic from the past. Here's the church, and here's the cemetery. Right here, the church is surrounded to the rear all in woods, and it's really beautiful back here, but there's a really funny thing that I noticed the second time I came out. I completely overlooked it the first time because of how overgrown it was out here in the summer, but I wanted to show y'all because I think it's funny. So this is the church's outhouse. Let me see how close I can get to show you guys what it looks like. If you can see, it even says men on the front door. So this is about the only time of year I would go out here. Most of the time this is like way too overgrown to get close to. The ladies' toilet has a fancy chair over it. The women's side of the outhouse. Let's be careful what we're gonna find in here. And here's the men's side. Real fancy in here. That's so funny. So let's see. If you see, it just says men on this side. It doesn't say anything on this side, but here's an old outhouse. I wonder what year this is from. A woven or like a wicker type chair has been placed over this hole in the ground to make it more suitable for the ladies. So I wanted to show you guys this. I hope you've enjoyed the history of this church and learning a little bit more about the cemetery. I will be coming back out here in the upcoming weeks as it warms up to clean up a little bit more. And I'm also going to be following along with the project to clean up the church. Keep posted here and I'll be happy to share any more updates that I get with you.